I'm Lara Jones, executive producer, co-host of Radioactive.
And I'm Billy Palmer. I am the associate producer for Radioactive and the director of Civic Engagement for KRCL.
So Radioactive is a show that we say is for grassroots activists and community builders. It's 1 hour, 5 nights a week, 6 o'clock on KRCL. And it's a show that's been around in different forms for a long time. Community activist Troy Williams was the leader of the show for many years before I inherited it. He's since gone on to lead Equality Utah in the community. So it's got a long history of attracting folks as guests and hosts that are active in the community in terms of socially progressive issues. And that's kind of KRCL's history too.
What brought me to Radioactive was some arm bending from Lara Jones. I came on as a guest. I had recently come back from Kentucky, where I was receiving an award for community leadership, and she wanted to interview me, and I did not want to do that. And she said, we can talk about one of your issues that you are passionate about, school to prison pipeline. And so I said, yes, I'll agree to come on and talk about that. And then, of course, she pins me into the corner, and we talk about the award and everything. So, but I realized that this show was really important through that interview, and realized that we could talk about issues in a much deeper way, in the way that was real with people that are actually impacted by some of the things that we talk about. And so I became very interested in listening to the show, and then maybe a month or two later, Lara Jones calls me up and says, hey, do you want to come on as a co-host? And she could probably tell you the way that she formatted it.
Well, you know, like when we were figuring out what his first show would be, it's like, let's do something light and easy. Let's talk about, what was it, rape culture?
It was about rape culture.
It was rape culture. So, and basically the way I formatted the show, we can talk about anything, but especially let's not be afraid of having those difficult conversations. And with people who have experienced what they're talking about, or have studied what they're talking about, or just want to even know more about it. We don't require anyone to be a subject matter expert with a PhD, and that's the beauty of KRCL and the show. It's by, for, and about the community. Civic engagement is such a heavy phrase for just getting off your ass and being a member of the community. All right? Billy comes to it from life experience, community organizer. Out of high school, I was in a teenage disc jockey, is my confession. But then I worked for a local business paper. And that, to find stories, put me at community council meetings, planning commission, city council, RDA. And that was my real education about how a city worked and who the power players were. And I think that can be a mystery to folks, or they can be intimidated by going to a city council meeting or the legislative session. And Billy, you probably agree, we're both from the punk rock era. It's like, DIY, man.
Yeah. Yep.
Get out there and just ask the question. And for me, as someone who's got a reporter's background, the only dumb question is the one that isn't asked. So I've never really been that intimidated by just asking a total stranger, so why do you think XYZ needs to happen in the community? And that's kind of what I think of civic engagement. Show up, play your part.
I think how I would describe civic engagement is this great big globule, beautiful thing. I mean, there's so many ways that you can be civically engaged, that there's not a real full description of it, and other than to say it is just anything that you can do within your power. And finding power is even more important in civic engagement. I think that's the thing I love about civic engagement is, to me, the best way to practice civic engagement, and the best thing about civic engagement is to turn on the light bulb in a sense, and then share that light, and then other people can find that within themselves. I think that's the best part of civic engagement, and that's the way, if it's done well, I think people find their power, they find that they can change the world, and that even one individual practicing their form of civic engagement, whether they're lobbying or going to community council meetings or something as small as just taking care of their neighbors. Anything like that is powerful. So the Poor People's Campaign is a fusion movement. 50 years ago, Dr. Martin Luther King, after the Civil Rights Act was passed, they realized the work's not done, that people, the next challenge for humanity is that poverty was growing, and that we were all affected, all of us affected by poverty, even the wealthy, all of us affected by racism, and all of us affected by the war economy is what Martin Luther King called it. And those were the three pillars that we needed to fight against. In order to do that, since everybody intersectionally is affected, then we needed to fight intersectionally. And so it's a campaign with white folks, black folks, Hispanic folks, Asian, gay, straight, people of faith, people not of faith, coming together across the country. We're now in 40 states, and Utah is one of those states that is beginning to formulate a strong, long-lasting, sustained campaign to fight against those three pillars, and then we've added another pillar, which is ecological devastation. So the purpose of this truly is to change the moral narrative. We feel that the moral narrative is distorted, that the way that we talk about poverty, any of those three pillars, the way that we talk about these things is there's a moral narrative that suggests that we have to speak about it in terms of how it's understood now, and that we need to change those narratives and actually talk about them in a more real sense, and talk about why we have to fight for these things. In 2019, why we're still talking about $15 per hour when we should be well beyond talking about $15 per hour. Some of these things are limited, and we need to bring it together and really talk about a moral revival of this country.
The issues that we're facing as a community really flow from what Billy was talking about, that the Poor People's Campaign is addressing, but immediately that comes to mind is homelessness. Back up from that, because people think it's happening to those folks over there, is the housing crisis. We do not have enough affordable housing, and I don't mean Section 8, I mean a variety of it. And Billy has a lot of experience with affordable housing, with his work with NeighborWorks, and can talk about how mixed income housing is more sustainable for neighborhoods. So housing, definitely. Health care, not the insurance, not the access, the actual health care. You know, I mean, it's all tied together. I guess you can't break it apart from the insurance and the access, but I mean, I was on a committee for 4th Street Clinic for a while, and its tagline was, homelessness hurts, healthcare helps. And there's so many folks that are winding up homeless due to medical issues. So those two for me, and then living wage. So if I hit all those, what's the fourth pillar? The environment.
The environment.
Yeah, inland port, the gravel pits, the air we breathe here, I mean, those are very real. Billy's talking about these broad concepts that we need to work on. Okay, here they are in our community.
Yep, they're broad, but everybody's dealing with them. They're all local conversations. They're all local issues. And that brings us around to why radioactive is important in our community. I believe the best way to start getting civically engaged, it starts at home. So what actions I think that can be taken for pretty much anybody, I think about it this way. Start at home, then work within your neighborhood, then work within your city, then work within your state, then work within your country, and then work within the world. All of those things are connected, and I think it all starts at home. So first thing to do, if you don't know where to start from home. Decide what your principles are, what you feel are most important things that is affecting you, and then what's affecting you and your neighbors. And then how can I get involved with my local government, my local communities, you can volunteer for the organizations that help your neighborhood. You can do any number of those things. And I think once you begin to, the things that affect you and your neighbors most is always the biggest motivator as well to continue that at work. Like most people I know that get civically engaged, you'll find yourself growing and speaking out for large things and being asked to join this and join that. And, you know, you become part of this community of weirdos that just volunteer themselves and put themselves out there for the good of their community. But one thing I love about it is it's a very wealthy life. It's a rich life to be civically engaged. It's a rich life to care for your neighbor and find that that care comes back to you tenfold.
Taking action is as simple as walking out your front door and knocking on the neighbor that you don't know and introducing yourself, as Billy was saying, and you build up from there. There is a power structure in our country as a representative democracy. So in Salt Lake City, there are community councils that are designed to draw the input from the residents to the community council, up to the city council, so that there's an avenue for information up and down. So get involved in your community council. You've been, Vice President, Secretary, Treasurer?
Secretary of Glendale Community Council, second Vice President,
Yeah, and it sometimes can be like watching paint dry, but that's where you can make a difference. You know, social media can really help get your message out. It's a tool, but to make a difference, you got to show up in person, in real life, and meet people where they are and work on issues together. You can also come on shows like Radioactive and share a story. Those are so powerful when they happen. I think you had one just the other night with our friends from Fit to Recover.
Absolutely.
People that are willing to come on and share their
own
stories,
experiences,
their struggles, their hardships, their mistakes, and how they've rebounded. That's, I really think, the power of Radioactive.
It's one thing to hear about an issue from a person that's an expert of that issue. It's another thing to hear about that issue from a person who's affected by the issue you're talking about. And that's the most inspiring thing, is when people are overcoming and you see that example of overcoming. That's amazing.
And we need more people and younger people involved in the community. You don't wait. Don't let adults make you believe that you can't do anything until you're 18 or you're 21. Trust me. They're just making sure that you're not at the table. Sorry, grown-ups. Wait, that's you and me.
Yep.
So yeah, don't let them keep you from what you want to do.
Yep.
If you look at March for Our Lives and the Utah chapter in particular, these kids do their homework.
Yep.
And you can't shout them down.
And they are constantly told, "Oh, you're too young to understand the world." Yeah, you understand the world. When you're young, you understand the world in a much more clear way than some of us that have been given so many filters and told how to understand it. So people know there are shortages of folks on advisory boards for the city. So there are many committees and boards that advise the mayor on making decisions that directly affect you, everywhere from streets to where the money goes for homeless services, you name it. And these boards are constantly populated, especially in communities that need services the most. And so that should be exactly the opposite. The people that are affected most and need the most services, or need to see a change in their neighborhood, that is one place you could start, is by just going to saltlakeCityGov.com and looking through all of those boards and deciding on what you're passionate about, whether it's police accountability, how the parks and streets are served in your neighborhood, and housing. All of those things are all that they all have representation by regular community members who send advice to all of those. Advice goes to the mayor. Decisions are made by the mayor based off of those, and then the city council also listens to those recordings. That is one thing. I've done that, and it's extremely powerful. You can take what your neighborhood is thinking and feeling and wants to see happen to those, and you can actually get what you want. It's really as simple as just showing up, and most often, if you say, I want to be the chair or the vice chair or the secretary of my district, my precinct, you're most likely to get it.
Yeah.
One. Two, if not, you can still remain involved after that, and you can talk to the organizers of those parties, whether you're Republican or Democratic or Green, you name it.
I say go to both of them.
Yeah.
Figure out what you
might
want.
as well. But the thing about it is, what's great about it is, you can also, there's plenty of at-large seats. There's plenty of groups within those where you have, union folk, you have school teachers, you have Hispanic folks, black folks, you name it. You can get involved with any one of those caucuses. And they help push policy along. That's the most important part about it, is they're pushing policy along. The folks that are running for office, those are their checks and balances, is those people.
So it percolates up from there.
Yeah.
So if you want to, it can take a long time to get involved all the way up to the governor's seat, but it can be done. People are doing it right now. And if you don't like what happened at the Utah legislature this session, find out who your representatives are on every level and get involved. And give them a piece of your mind. I'm not saying yell at them. I'm not saying write nasty emails, but start that dialogue with them.
I think the community leaders that I admire most, one we lost, and it was Archie Archuleta. Robert Archuleta was a mentor to probably everybody in this room right now, the interviewer, the interviewee, but to mayors, to the district attorney, to legislators, you name it. His principle of peace, justice, and equality, and living a life with those constantly at the forefront, really, I feel were transformative for me in my life. I grew up in his neighborhood. He helped start the youth program that I graduated from, that started me on the path of community involvement, and he shepherded me along the way in just being able to step aside and say, you're doing a good job here, let me give you a few tips. That's the type of person that he was. And he always sought the power in other people for them to empower themselves. And it was never about him. And he's the most amazing person in that respect to mentorship that I've experienced.
There's a lot of ways to be involved in your own group, but there's also lots of great organizations that need your help. The Road Home, 4th Street Clinic, the In-Between.
That list is
Yeah,
huge.
the Other Side Academy. There's so many different ways, and all you got to do is go knock on the door and say, hey, I'd really like to help. Put me to work. So there are a lot of resources that you can find online. You go to krcl.org, click on Community Affairs, you'll see our Rallies and Resources tab that we are constantly putting things in that we think grassroots activists and community builders would be interested in either supporting, attending, learning about so many different things. That's one of them right there. As Billy said, slcgov.com at the city. You can also go to City Hall. If you do not have access to a computer, go to your city's hall, and there's lots of information there. You can also go to your neighborhood library and access all sorts of things. Reference librarians are your friend.
Yeah.
They have so much information in every city, and I think county library has information, a citizenship corner. Voterize, groups that will register you to vote, and then you can sign up for text messaging services that will alert you when your races are coming up and such. There's the Remember 2020 program that Better Utah is launching, Alliance for Better Utah, so that you can remember what upset you about the last election when it comes time to vote again.
There's community councils. Almost every single neighborhood in your city has a community council where people can get together and talk about issues and send that message to the city. You have school board councils as well. You have where concerned parents can go and voice their grievances or offer improvements to education, and that goes to the school board. And the school board, typically representatives of the school board come. So there's always access to the folks that are making decisions about community. You just need to know where to go, and it's really about what she said. Just head out, walk out the door.
Yeah. You can tune in to Radioactive weeknights from 6 to 7 on 90.9 FM in Salt Lake City, but there are other ways to listen to.
That's right. You can go to krcl.org, and we also have an app, KRCL, and you can listen on demand to every single Radioactive show. They're all blogged, and you can search by category of things you're interested in. So there's no excuse to not listen to our show.
And by the way, if you got something to say, email us, radioactive@krcl.org.